Chapter 196. Felicity had a proud expression. It only took her a year and a half to climb from being a nameless inspector to deputy chief. The erosion of the Green Bamboo Association caused chaos in the major cities in Sagan that they ruled. When she was named deputy chief, she used violence to control violence and personally led the people to suppress the Green Bamboo Association. Now, the people from the Green Bamboo Association avoid her. The only disadvantage was that it was difficult to make her identity public. After all, her methods were rather cruel. Angelica quickly gestured to Felicity to shut up when she heard her increasingly outrageous humiliation towards Nash. "Felice, stop embarrassing Mr. Calcraft. His identity is more than you could imagine." Felicity snorted and said, "What? Isn't he just some random director of some random place? You think any random person can have the same talent and power as me? He's the sworn brother of the Northern Territories warden." "Damn!" Felicity staggered and almost fell to the ground. She stared at Angelica with wide eyes and asked, "Are you sure about that? How it is possible that he's the sworn brother of the Northern Territories warden?" Angelica glanced behind and saw Nash in the far distance, so she whispered to Felicity, "Because he helped the warden change his fate." Felicity's eyes narrowed. "You mean he cured the warden?" Angelica nodded. "That's right." Felicity was silent for a moment. "Then what does he have to do with the incident with Wesley?" Angelica told Felicity every single detail about the Lewis family. After walking for half an hour, they reached the end of Bronzetown. There was a huge lake ahead of them. Lotus leaves and flowers were floating in the lake. A 500 meters long wooden bridge led directly to the other side. It was already 6 o'clock by that time, and the tourists on the bridge had begun to leave. The tourists who wanted to go on the bridge were stopped by the staff. "I'm sorry, but the tourist attraction is closing soon and all the tourists must leave before closing time." As he said that, a middle-aged woman who was carrying a flower basket walked onto the wooden bridge. Angelica asked unhappily, "Why can she get on the bridge?" The staff explained, "She's a resident of Bronzetown, and there are no restrictions for local residents." Felicity took out a red ID card from her back pocket. "Can I enter with this?" The staff checked her ID card and frowned slightly. "National Special Security Institution?" The Special Security Institution was an institution with extremely powerful rights. Their ID card was like magic. It was possible to enter any location with ease and could get the cooperation of any organization they wished. However, the staff questioned the authenticity of the identification card. Felicity took out her deputy director's certificate, suppressed her anger, and grunted, "Whatever, take a look at this certificate." When he saw the words Deputy Director of Sagan Inspection Department on the document, he believed Felicity's identity. He laughed and said, "Hold on a moment. I'll make a call and report to the higher authorities." Felicity snatched the certificate back and walked straight to the bridge. The staff wanted to stop her, but Felicity turned around and kicked him to the ground. Nash and Angelica were frozen in place. "Why are you two still standing there?" Felicity warned them and then strode across the wooden bridge. Nash regained his composure and followed closely behind Angelica. Lotus Cemetery was on the other side of the wooden bridge. After crossing the bridge, there was a wooden fence. A log cabin sat beside the fence. The caretaker of the cemetery lived in the cabin. The woman from the bridge earlier was chatting and laughing with the caretaker. When the woman left, the three of them approached the cabin. The small old man in the cabin frowned and asked, "Are you tourists?" Nash nodded and said, "Yes." The old man asked again, "Are you here to visit the cemetery?" Felicity answered, "We're from the inspection department and we're here on business. Please open the door and let us in." "I can't do that. There are rules in Lotus Cemetery. You can't enter unless you are related to the deceased buried inside." The old man shook his head and refused. Then he picked up a tobacco pipe and lit it. He exhaled the smoke and said, "Please go home. I can't let you in." Chapter 197. Felicity took out her ID card with a sullen expression. "I'm Sagan's deputy chief inspector. I suspect that there is a criminal hidden in this area. Please cooperate." The old man snorted and said, "I don't care if you're the deputy chief. Even if God himself comes, I won't let him in." Nash and Angelica took a few steps back when they realized how stubborn the old man was. Bang! Felicity shattered a part of the fence with one punch. She grabbed the old man by the collar. The old man frowned and lowered the tobacco pipe in his hand. Felicity lowered her arm and frowned. I didn't expect you to be a martial artist. The old man spun the tobacco pipe and swung it towards Felicity's throat. Felicity tilted her head to dodge his attack. The old man stood up and smashed the remainder of the fence with his fist. Felicity reacted by clenching her fist and throwing it at him. Boom! Felicity took several steps back. However, the old man remained motionless. The old man snickered. Girl, you're too weak. Come back after you've trained more. Felicity stared at the old man in horror. You're a great grandmaster. She was a stage 9 grandmaster, but she could not shake the old man. That was enough evidence to show that he was a great grandmaster at the very least. The old man raised his chin arrogantly. I am merely but a stage 3 great grandmaster. Stage 3. Felicity gasped. In the journey of martial arts, there are two methods. One was martial arts of physical energy and the other was martial arts of inner energy. The martial arts of physical energy practiced boxing and kicking, whilst the martial arts of inner energy cultivated inner strength. There were 3 divisions for inner energy, 9 stages of gathering energy, 9 stages of grandmasters, 9 stages of great grandmasters. There were a handful of martial artists who could enter the grandmaster realm, or at the very least, she had minimal contact with grandmasters. It was even harder for her to imagine any contact with great grandmasters. As for a stage 3 great grandmaster, it was a dream come true. Nash politely said, Sir, we really need to enter the cemetery as it's for important business. Please cooperate with us. The old man drew a few puffs from his tobacco pipe and laughed. Aren't you guys crazy? Don't blame me for not giving you a chance. The 3 of you attack me at once, and if you can simply graze my clothes, I'll let you in. Nash sighed. Then please come out. I'll fight you. The old man pushed open the door and walked out. Felicity warned, Nash, this guy is really strong. Just forget about it. The old man did not even give Nash a chance to prepare. He spun his tobacco pipe and hit Nash on the head. Bang! Splash! A dull sound rang out and there was the sound of a heavy object falling into the water. Felicity stared at Nash dumbfoundedly. Then, she turned her head slowly and saw the old man who had fallen into the lake with a punch. Oh my gosh! Am I dreaming? Felicity turned to look at Angelica. You're not dreaming. Mr. Calcraft is just that strong. Angelica had expected this outside, but she could not help but to feel tingles down her spine. The last time she saw Nash make a move like that was during the incident at Rococo Technology Co. Limited to save Brian. Mr. Calcraft had defeated dozens of elite bodyguards hired by Helena in mere seconds. The old man climbed onto the shore, spat out a mouthful of water, and stared at Nash in horror. You're from the profound reality realm. Nash chuckled. Can we enter now? Chapter 198. Sue. Sure. When faced with true strength, all rules were in vain. The caretaker hurriedly ran into the cabin and opened the electronic gate to the cemetery. There were a few dim street lamps along the cemetery. Under the faint light, the cemetery looked rather gloomy. Nash, Angelica, and Felicity walked into the cemetery. They saw several residents of the town kneeling and burning incense in front of ancient tombstones. Felicity turned to look at Angelica and Nash. Can you find the girl's grave? Angelica shook her head. We don't even know her name. Nash said lightly. Let's just find a place to hide and wait for Wesley. The 3 of them walked deep into the cemetery and hid behind a semicircular-shaped tombstone. Some ordinary people were buried without any valuable items in the graves, so they were not worried about being robbed. Nash found some dried weed on the ground, sat on them cross-legged, and closed his eyes to rest. Angelica and Felicity played with their phones to pass the time. It's almost 12. Is Wesley still coming? The 2 of them nearly drained their phone's battery. Felicity put her phone away and looked around nervously. It was eerie and spooky in the cemetery at night. Although Felicity was Sagan's deputy chief inspector, she was still a girl in her 20s, so being in a cemetery in the middle of the night scared her. Let's keep waiting. Wesley bought a plane ticket for tomorrow, so we might have to wait until then. Angelica took a look at her surroundings too. then moved towards Felicity. She glanced at Nash with admiration. Since the time Nash had started meditating, it was as if he was in a trance and remained motionless for 4 hours. Most people did not have that type of stamina. Felicity looked at Nash too and whispered, "By the way, this guy is really strong. Send me his contact info." Angelica pursed her lips and smiled. "For what? He has a family." Nash had a handsome face and a strong body, which made him very attractive. "What do you think? I just want to make a new friend." Felicity blushed. "The more friends you have, the more options you have in life." Angelica stifled her laughter. "I'm not that close with him. If you really want his contact info, you can go ask him yourself." Felicity pouted. "Fine. He's exactly like I described anyways, so I doubt he will talk to me." Time slowly ticked by. At 2 in the morning, the cemetery was getting more and more quiet. Angelica and Felicity leaned on each other sleepily. However, when Nash slowly opened his eyes, he whispered, "Someone's coming." Angelica and Felicity shuddered and immediately scouted the cemetery. Not long after, a dark figure walked to a nearby modern-looking tombstone. The figure was tall and burly. They held flowers in his left hand and some joss paper in his right. He sat on the ground, placed the flowers in front of the grave, and began to burn the offerings. Angelica asked cautiously, Is that Wesley?" Felicity ordered in a whisper. "Angelica, go around the back and block the entrance. I'm going to grab him." "All right." Angelica agreed without hesitation. She was merely a no-name inspector and Felicity was the deputy chief inspector. It was only natural for Angelica to obey Felicity's orders. The two of them had a close relationship too, so they were the most compatible duo to arrest Wesley. Nash frowned. "Hold on. There is a possibility that is not Wesley." Angelica and Felicity froze. They could not imagine who would come to the cemetery at this hour other than Wesley. Nash continued, "Wesley is a very cautious man. He had likely hired someone to test the waters. Rather, there's no way he would visit his first girlfriend himself." Chapter 199. When Angelica thought of the call Wesley and Cale had only hesitated for 3 seconds before Wesley caught on. Given his level of observation, it was indeed unlikely that he would come to the cemetery. The three of them continued to hide behind the tombstone. The burly man finished burning the offerings and sat in front of the grave to light a cigarette. Then, he took out a bottle of white wine from the bag next to him and drank it. Felicity squinted and said, "What if he's doing the opposite?" Angelica was slightly taken aback. "What do you mean?" "She means that Wesley probably predicted our plan." Felicity's words made Nash feel rather uncertain. If Wesley predicted that someone was staking out at the cemetery and figured out their plans, then the person who came to burn the offerings could have been one of Wesley's men. Nash was sure that the person in the dark would have suspected that they knew he was not Wesley. That was only a possibility. If the man was not Wesley and they were to arrest him, it would only alert the enemy and the real Wesley would have escaped. Felicity whispered, "If they were just here to visit the grave, they should have left after they finished burning the offerings. Why would they sit down to have a smoke and drink?" After she finished, Felicity dashed out like an arrow. Angelica quickly followed behind. "Wesley!" Felicity walked up to the grave. The burly man who was sitting across from her slowly raised his head and asked curiously, "Who are you?" "Sagan's deputy chief inspector," Felicity said coldly. The burly man smiled and said, "I'm not Wesley." Felicity sneered. "You're Wesley. You're leaving the country tomorrow, so you came in the middle of the night to visit your first love." The burly man looked at Felicity as if she was an idiot. "Are you crazy? This is my younger sister. I just got to Bronzetown today. What's wrong with coming to visit her?" "Younger sister?" Felicity's lips tightened into a straight line. Angelica said in a low voice, "Then, you know Wesley Walker, right?" The man nodded. "Yes, that's my sister's first boyfriend." Felicity's face turned pale and she closed her eyes. Mission failed. This guy was without a doubt working with Wesley. The real Wesley must have already seen her and Angelica. On a big tree opposite the lotus pond, a man in a hoodie was holding a sniper rifle aimed at the burly man in the cemetery. He put his finger on the trigger and his right eye was fixed on the scope attached to the sniper rifle. He could hear the conversation live through the wireless Bluetooth earpiece. He moved the crosshair between Felicity and Angelica. Finally, the crosshair is locked on the photo on the tombstone. When he saw the girl with pigtails and a pure smile on her face, the man's hands began to tremble. Wesley, at that very moment, a rustling sound came from under the tree. The man immediately pointed the rifle at the source of the sound and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A loud gunshot spread throughout the town. The burly man who was speaking with Felicity in the cemetery heard the gunshot and immediately put his arms around his head. He had been told that if he were to misspeak, he would be shot dead. When he heard the gunshot at that moment, he thought he had made a mistake. Felicity whipped her head around to look across the lotus pond and then ran out of the cemetery at lightning speed. Chapter 200. Felicity arrived at the tree where the sniper was hiding, but she only saw Nash. Nash? When did you get here? Felicity quickly walked towards him. She had not seen Nash since she lunged at the man with Angelica. It had taken her only 3 minutes to get to this side of the shore when she heard the gunshots. She did not notice Nash on the bridge earlier either. Was it Wesley who shot just now? Where is he? Felicity looked up at the tree. People from Skyblade Group took him. Nash narrowed his eyes and disappeared in a flash. Felicity's pupils shrank in shock. He's fast. On an open grassy field outside Bronzetown, 2 muscular middle-aged men carried Wesley towards a helicopter. I'll give you $140 million if you let me go. Wesley struggled to get free, but he could not exert much strength after being injected with an anesthetic. We swore an oath when we joined the Skyblade Group. We will never betray the organization in this life or the next, one of the muscular men said blankly. However, $140 million was an enticing amount. If they had accepted the money, they would be set for the rest of their lives and they would never have to live in fear of poverty. However, they chose to fulfill their oath. Wesley was pushed onto the helicopter and the 2 men got in as well. The pilot immediately started the engine and the propeller roared. The helicopter was quickly lifted into the sky. Bang! Out of the blue, the helicopter shook violently. The men of the Skyblade Group frowned. The muscular man who was sitting in the back seat asked, "What's going on?" The pilot replied in a panicked voice, "I think that was a person." The other muscular man pushed open the helicopter's door and looked down. Nash was holding onto the helicopter's landing gear with both hands. Nash swung himself forward. He clamped onto the man's neck with his legs and viciously twisted it. The man died instantly and was thrown from the helicopter. The others reacted quickly and pulled out their pistols. However, Nash had already gotten into the cabin, which led to sounds of gunshots and fighting coming from the helicopter. Shortly after, Nash put a gun to the back of the pilot's head and said in a deep voice, "Fly back." The pilot gulped and reached out to press a button on the control panel. Wesley shouted, "That's the self-destruct button." He instantly pushed Nash out of the helicopter. Nash grabbed Wesley by the wrist and pulled him along. Boom! The moment the 2 of them left the helicopter, it exploded into a fiery ball. Nash and Wesley fell rapidly from 1,000 meters high in the air. Below them were hills upon hills of rocks. They would die on impact. Even if Nash used the power of the profound reality realm, his bones would still be crushed into pieces. Felicity stared at the flames in the sky and stood stunned in place. She relied on her sense of virtue to catch up to Nash. However, all she saw was Nash jumping up by tens of meters and grabbing onto the helicopter's landing gear. Then the helicopter flew to an altitude of 1,000 meters. Now that the helicopter had exploded, it would be impossible for Nash and Wesley to survive. Nash grasped Wesley's wrist tightly. When they were 100 meters above ground, he used all the strength in his body to turn around in the air and strongly threw Wesley onto the grassy area beside the cliff. Boom!